Okay, welcome back to the channel everyone, and welcome to a new series, or what I hope will become a new series, that I'm calling Park Profiles. These are going to be short biographical sketches of some of the most important figures in national park and conservation history, and they're going to be designed to give you all an understanding of some of the people that have shaped the world of parks as we know it today. I'm kind of envisioning these as sort of filler/reference episodes that will provide a little more context to both past stories I've already told here on the channel and future stories that are yet to be told. A lot of the people that will appear in this series have popped up in past videos and will continue to pop up in future ones, but I can't always flesh them out all the way just because of time constraints and story flow and stuff like that. So I have devised this series to help fill in the gaps. And I've been mulling this over for a while, but I do want to give a big shout out to Imorca 1994 for their suggestion of a series of biography videos, which basically is what this series is going to be. So thank you for that, Imorca 1994. All right. I think that's all the admin introduction stuff taken care of. So let's go ahead and get started with our first park profile of Stephen Mather. Okay, I could not think of a better person to kick this series off than Stephen Ting Mather, the first director of the National Park Service and the man who basically created the service as we know it today. And he has an interesting background for a Park Service director. He kind of took a unique path to get to that position. First, he was born on July 4th, 1867 in San Francisco, California. He was born into a pretty wealthy family, and if you know your American colonial history, you may recognize his last name. He is a distant relation of the famous Puritan ministers Increase and Cotton Mather. His family and wealth allowed him to attend a private all-boys high school and eventually to graduate from the University of California, Berkeley with a Bachelor of Letters in 1887, whatever that means. From there, he went on to be a reporter for the New York Sun until 1893 when he left to go work with his father for the Pacific Coast Borax Company. Here is where we see his first connection to the National Park Service because, while working for this company, he proved to be a highly skilled marketer, which is a talent that would very much come in handy when he was heading up the Park Service. Like, apparently I'm too young to really remember this brand, but the older folks in my audience may be familiar with the 20 Mule Team Borax. Yeah, that was Stephen Mather. He came up with that.
20 Mule Team Borax cuts grease, loosens ground-in dirt.
Anyway, while he was still working for this borax company, he helped a friend of his, Thomas Thorkildsen, start up another borax company in 1898. And it's at this point that I think we should bring up a part of Stephen Mather's life that isn't often discussed, which is the fact that he suffered from bipolar disorder, or as it probably would have been called back then, manic depression. The reason Mather isn't typically associated with bipolar disorder is because he went to great lengths to hide it from his public life, kind of like FDR and polio. He suffered from severe depressive episodes throughout his life, including during his tenure as the director of the National Park Service, some of which required hospitalization and medical treatment, during which time his assistant, Horace Albright, would serve as acting director. He will most likely appear in this series at some point as well. Mather frequently cited national parks and other natural places as helping him to recover from these episodes, and he was ultimately able to have a highly productive life and career despite his struggles with the disease. Heading back to our timeline, it was actually one of those depressive episodes which forced him out of his job with the Pacific Coast Borax Company and would ultimately change his life forever. After leaving that borax company, he joined the company he had helped start with his friend, which they had named Thorkildsen Mather Borax Company. Within 10 years, the company was so successful that Mather became a millionaire. This new level of wealth allowed Mather to pursue his other interests in life, and this is where his trajectory starts to heavily intersect with the National Park Service. After the success of Thorkildsen Mather Borax Company, Mather became heavily involved with civic groups, one of which was the Sierra Club. He went on outings with the club and frequented the Sierras on trips, which fostered within him a love of the mountains, the outdoors, and national parks. There was also a formative trip to Europe in these years, where Mather observed the public accessibility of parks and longed to bring such an approach to the United States. He very much believed in the power of public accessibility for protected parklands. In Mather's mind, making more parks accessible to more people meant more visitors, which meant more public support for parks, which meant more public pressure on politicians, which resulted in more money for parks, which could then be reinvested to improve those parks and attract even more visitors. This was the guiding philosophy behind Mather's approach to park management, and one which he would espouse throughout his tenure with the National Park Service. Now, as for how Mather got on board with the NPS in the first place, well, this is one of those things where the accepted story has been a little bit embellished over the years. According to this story, the accepted story, Mather noted the sorry state of parks and how they were being managed on one of his trips. He wrote a letter to then Secretary of the Interior Franklin Lane complaining about it, to which Lane responded in another letter that Mather should just come to DC and manage the parks himself. In actuality, things didn't really happen that instantaneously. It is probably true that Mather wrote a letter to Franklin Lane, but really they were connected through a common acquaintance and corresponded for a bit before Lane set up a meeting and asked him to come on board at Interior to oversee the parks. So this process took a little while. Ultimately, Mather arrived as an Assistant Secretary of the Interior in 1915, which the National Park Service was not even a thing at this time. It did not exist. In fact, one of the reasons Mather was hired was to launch a publicity campaign, remember, he was a skilled marketer, for the creation of a National Parks Bureau or a National Park Service. He originally only agreed to do this job for a year, but he spent nearly 2 years on this campaign alone until, in August 1916, Woodrow Wilson signed the National Park Service Organic Act, creating the agency we know today. Stephen Mather became its first director the following April and held the position for the next 12 years. And at this point, I just kind of want to jump out of the timeline here and try and contextualize the scale of the impact that Mather had as director. I already talked about his philosophy behind attracting people to the parks and building a sort of grassroots network of everyday people who would visit, support, and advocate for the parks. This was the bedrock of what he was trying to do with the national park system, because he realized it needed legitimacy. See, today we are well aware of the significance of national parks on the American landscape. They are one of our most beloved institutions. But back then, this was far from the case. National parks existed, of course, but they were nowhere near as widely loved or supported as they are today. Mather, with his marketing genius and charisma, began to change this. By attracting all these people to the parks, popularizing them in the press, billing them as the next great American institution, putting political pressure on elected officials, he built the image we have of the national parks today. He flipped a switch in the public's perception of these places, and thus in politicians' perception of these places, and legitimized this fledgling national park system and this fledgling national park movement. But it wasn't just marketing and charisma holding this whole endeavor together. After attracting the masses to the national parks, he advocated for vast amounts of park infrastructure to be developed to accommodate those visitors. Kind of like a two-pronged approach, attract then accommodate. Most of the time, this came in the form of roads, like going to the Sun Road in Glacier so that people could visit the parks in their newly acquired automobiles, but also visitor centers, campgrounds, and lodging. He was behind the modern system of concessionaires in parks because, again, he wanted amenities in parks that would attract people to visit them so that they would turn around and spread the word and write their politicians about how much they love national parks and just overall build support for them institutionally and socially and politically. And on the less glamorous, less public-facing side of things, he made sure that the infant park service became a legitimate bureaucratic institution. So prior to this, parks were either managed by the military or by political appointees. It was sort of like a bare bones protective management, basically just to make sure these parks were open and accessible. Once Mather took over though, the Park Service hired seasoned professionals and specialists to oversee the parks. So this might have meant hiring a biologist or an archaeologist or some other professional that could take care of the park in the way that best suited its specific needs. The modern system of interpretation and educational ranger programming was adopted during his tenure as well, and Mather was the first director to really emphasize a sort of selection criteria for national parks. He wanted the most scenic and beautiful places in America to be protected under the National Park Service banner. Again, this was all in service of building out the physical and social and bureaucratic and political infrastructure of the newly created National Park Service to accommodate more visitors and legitimize this entire operation, this entire national park idea, really. National parks needed someone to grab the wheel, steady the ship, and guide them to a more stable, more publicly supported, more legitimized future. Stephen Mather was the captain who accomplished this. When he got to Interior in 1915, the park system had 14 national parks and 18 national monuments under its umbrella. By the time he left, there were 20 parks and 32 national monuments. More than one park per year was added to the system during his tenure, and that doesn't include the parks and monuments that were enlarged during this time. Oh, and did I mention he did a lot of this with his own money? Yeah, by one account, he spent over $250,000 of his own money, nearly $6.5 million today, financing land acquisition, infrastructure, and even employee salaries in service of the national parks. Considering the Park Service had a budget of like $20,000 annually back then, that's a big chunk of money, and it goes to show how committed Mather was to the cause, putting that much of his own fortune into something he truly believed in. And of course, he did this with a whole lot of help. I don't want to discount the efforts of those around him, particularly Horace Albright, who again, I'll probably cover in another episode, but this is the Stephen Mather episode, so I'm just framing things through his lens. The point is, though, Stephen Mather is one of the most seminal figures in the history of the National Park Service. His efforts legitimized this fledgling idea and agency in the eyes of the public and politicians and helped lay the groundwork for basically everything the National Park Service is today. His marketing expertise, his charisma and energy, even his own money, all went into this cause he was so passionate about. And his impact is memorialized in a bunch of national parks today in the form of a plaque that reads, quote, "He laid the foundation of the National Park Service, defining and establishing the policies under which its areas shall be developed and conserved unimpaired for future generations. There will never come an end to the good that he has done." Stephen Mather passed away on January 22nd, 1930, less than a year after leaving the Park Service. And that is the first episode of Park Profiles. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't think of anyone better to kick things off for this series. Do let me know your thoughts on Stephen Mather down below, as well as other people you'd like to see covered here on the Park Profiles series. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell thing, because that really does help me to bring these stories to more people and share the power of protected places with them. If you are interested in supporting me more directly, I do have a Patreon you can check out. These stories are quite literally impossible to make without the support of my patrons, and your help over there really, really does go a long way to helping me keep this channel going. You can follow me on Instagram if you like. It's the easiest place to get in touch with me and keep up to date with anything that's happening on the channel. Other than that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.